All right, everybody, we are here today. We're at the Bitcoin Policy Summit run by the Bitcoin Policy Institute. We are here today with Lyudmyla Kozlovska. Lyudmyla is the president of the Open Dialogue Foundation, and Jorge Jraissati, who is the president of the Organization for Economic Inclusion. So what we're going to be talking about today is a little bit about economic inclusion. We'll talk a little bit about, I think you were just on a panel talking about digital authoritarianism, how Bitcoin can be an antidote to that, or at least something to help fight that. And then also Bitcoin in the way that pro-democracy activists and human rights activists use the tool. So before we get started, Lyudmyla, please introduce yourself a bit more.
Thank you. Hello, everyone who is attending our podcast, our recording. First of all, I'm Ukrainian and I'm a human rights advocate. I'm a human rights defender, and I was financially excluded because of the attack of three authoritarian regimes since 2018 in the very heart of Europe, in Brussels. Belgian bank basically, unfortunately, shared my banking data and allowed authoritarian regimes, to weaponize it. And this is the reason why I started to use Bitcoin to protect human rights, protect myself, my family, my lawyers, accounting, volunteers, everyone who was affected, our donors and recipients. And thanks to Bitcoin privacy payment instruments, peer-to-peer transactions, we actually succeed to have it. And this is also the reason why we educate regulators of G7 countries not to use negative labeling in regulation towards this important freedom technology.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And before I pass the mic over to Jorge, I want to also point out Lyudmyla and Jorge also worked on a team with Obi from FEDI and also with Rafa Cordon from Simple Proof. He was he was the person who helped to safeguard the last presidential election in Guatemala. And they've done work educating people, senators, Congress people, members of the State Department in the United States. So really, really important work. On that note, Jorge, a little more about yourself, please.
Yes, my name is Jorge. I'm from Venezuela. And as you may know, I come from a very dictatorial country, authoritarian country. Yeah. So basically, I have been trying to dedicate my life to bring freedom and democracy to my country. When I start to rally up young people, when I try to rally up activists, we often talk about with the strategies, tools we need to use to bring democracy to our place. And basically, at the beginning, it was about communication. At the beginning, it was about diplomatic tools, but we realized that we also needed financial tools. We realized that authoritarian regimes were attacking us through financial institutions, through financial means, and this is the way I started working on Bitcoin. And as you mentioned, in my organization, we're focusing on the economic inclusion of all people. I do believe that if we don't include people economically, our democracies are doomed to fail. I do believe that young people deserve a right to financial inclusion. They deserve a right to housing access, and they deserve a right to prosperity. And right now, most young people are dissatisfied with the way the economy is going, with governments, the way they are dealing with inflation. And if we don't stop this trend, then the same thing that happened in Venezuela can happen in other places. So because of this, we're working extremely hard to create mechanisms for young people to actually shape policy. And this is something that we are doing in G7 countries, something that we are doing in Europe, something that we're doing here in the US. And again, tools for freedom like Bitcoin and economic inclusion of all people.
Cool. So we're here in Washington, D.C. You're talking about we're talking about also people living under authoritarian regimes, people in developing economies. Lyudmyla, you've talked about how it's essential, or you've both talked about how it's essential that the U.S. gets regulation right around Bitcoin, and some of that has to do with AML, KYC, and just generally not speaking about Bitcoin with a punitive tone, saying that it's a bad thing necessarily. Could you expand a little bit about why that's important, why the messaging from a place like the United States, Washington, D.C. is important for the rest of the world?
So first of all, U.S. established the same like EU golden standards for financial regulations globally. And that means that regulation adopted in US, in EU, affect all of us globally. And first of all, of course, we speak about on behalf of activists, or activist opposition, everyone who is actually opposing regimes, because we all financially excluded. And when we see that the most important tool like Bitcoin, peer-to-peer transactions with use of self-hosted wallets, privacy instruments like mixers, labeled with a, as you said, negative connotation, it means that all of us are going to be persecuted or criminalized even at some point by authoritarian regimes. It gives them more power to go after developers, to go after those users, those who actually enforcing these peer-to-peer transactions, right? Making it's possible to happen in authoritarian states. And it's also going after donors, investors, right? So we don't want this to happen. And for this reason, we defend it in G7 countries in democracy. And US is key country, which actually also have significant, I would say, the biggest impact for financial action task forces. Okay. And we know that exactly in this situation, all of these recommendations created, and they created in a very untransparent way, where we as civil society have no almost access to have impact. And from all of our experience working with different interparliamentary institutions, we know that it's essential for regulation to be objective, to be as much as possible with use of justice and benefit for society. If civil society, developers, and actually companies from industry, they participate in this legislative process. So we try to do as much as possible to educate regulators and policymakers, so they include our voices. They know that negative language affects all of us. And we deserve to be not in gray zone. We want to be actually as legitimate, to support as much as possible scaling of this technology, because let's say G7 countries is minority in the world. This is such privileged small amount of people comparing to those who are financially excluded, who live without banking and access to banking, and where banking is just a weapon in arms of dictators. And for this reason, we shouldn't abandon these voices. And we try to be voices of those people who actually limited from access to regulators.
It's a very thorough response. Thank you. Super important. Both Lyudmyla and Jorge travel the world. You both travel the world spreading this message, not only to regulators and to people in the United States. Jorge, you were just in South Korea, and we were talking before this interview, and you said, it was you started a panel there, and you were talking about, I think it was like youth and economic empowerment, and you didn't necessarily want to lead with Bitcoin because you sort of felt that it might turn people off. But you brought a person we mentioned earlier, Rafael Cordon, someone who helped use Bitcoin to safeguard an election in his home country of Guatemala. And you said that you started speaking on the panel, and then people started to come around. So can you talk a little bit about that process of how do you speak to power about this? How do you find that entry point to get their attention, and then to explain to them what the true benefits of something like Bitcoin really are?
I mean, the first thing that I want to say is that policymakers, the vast majority of them, they want a better future. They want to collaborate, and they want to strengthen democracy. There are several barriers that you need to try to overcome when talking to them. Most of them is even a generational barrier. Others is just risk aversion, and others just the fact that they are not expert, and they have not lived this issue. So when I talk to them, I tell them that for me, my goal is to bring democracy to my country. And for me, Bitcoin is a tool towards achieving this. I don't have a developer background, for example. I'm not somebody who came into Bitcoin for investment purposes. I came because I saw how it's an essential tool for freedom. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, I think it's really important. It's really important to go to these places. For example, you mentioned the Summit for Democracy, because these are the places where decisions are taken. These are the places where policymakers make decisions that, for better or for worse, affect the life of everybody. Sometimes when I speak with people, for example, from the US, they tell me that they don't like to get involved in politics. But when you come from a country like ours, you realize that this is not a choice. My family, I come from a family of small business people, right? Family that never discussed politics. Family that just wanted to work hard, increase their savings, and one day retire safely and retire with a happy life. They did not have a choice. Government and politics came to their household. Government and politics destroyed their life. And government and politics basically took over my country. In my country, 90% of people live in poverty. So for me, it's not a choice on an aggregate level. And on a personal level, we all have a duty. We have a duty to make changes. And we have a duty to be effective. And right now, the call that we have is that we need to educate policymakers. Because right now, throughout the world, there is an intense discussion on how to regulate the financial system. The financial system theoretically should be, and the main purpose should be, to be an intermediation between available capital and profit opportunities. But the reality is that they always focus a lot on tackling financial crime. All these regulations aim to tackling financial crime. And if these regulations are done in ways in which they result in millions of people losing their financial access, then we're doomed to fail. So that's what we have to do. And specifically and concretely on the Guatemala case, they were astonished. They were astonished that, for those of you who do not know, they were astonished that in a place like Guatemala, Bitcoin, blockchain technology was used to safeguard elections, to create digital footprint of tally sheet, and to have a record, transparent, universally accessible record of what happened. And what I tell all of them, what happened if we had this technology 20 years ago in Venezuela? What would have been the future? My country maybe would not be a dictatorship today.
Yeah.
So something that all of us we need to fight for and we need to encourage is that then this technology is adopted, is recommended, and that we understand. And we are, I think, at the forefront of this trend.
Yeah, and I think that everything you just said there takes something that you mentioned earlier today in your talk. You said if you don't defend your human rights, you will lose them. I think a lot of people in the United States, they're very quick to say, oh, I'm not a political person. I just work hard, much like Jorge's family, maybe not just the United States, but people say this around the world. But I think what's the phrase? So you might not have an interest in politics, but politics has an interest in you or something like that. So could you just touch on a little bit of what you shared today in your talk?
Absolutely. So when I say that you have to defend your human rights, and Bitcoin for me, it's a human rights, it's a tool for financial freedom, and I really mean it because I experienced attack of 3 authoritarian regime. I resisted, not only resisted, I was able to support and teach others, activists, how to use it as a powerful tool to provide humanitarian aid, for example, in Ukraine, right? To provide humanitarian aid for families of political prisoners where they all financially excluded. So when we speak about the privilege not to defend your human rights or actually say that I'm not in politics, it means that someone did this job for you before.
Yeah.
It means that your parents, grandparents, or someone around them, they fight it for it and they were in this politics. And this is the reason why you live in this wonderful world, which is called G7 countries for US, which is a place where democracy is, compared to other states where democracy it is, right?
Yeah.
Right now. And you can lose it. You can really lose it if you don't exercise your right. If you don't do your sports, I'm sorry, you're going to lose your body.
If you don't train, right?
Yes,
yeah, if you don't train.
This is sad reality.
Yeah.
You need to maintain your health, and actually the same with human rights, and the same with people who care about it, who develop it. And this is the reason, for example, why we as Open Dialogue Foundation were on the front line to defend Rafa Cardon, was one of defender and developer of rule of law. Rule of law in Guatemala through technology of Bitcoin, which defends result of election. We try to make as much as possible media in European Union and international institutions and present his case, showing, guys, you're happy about the result that authoritarian regime, corrupt regime was not able to fake election result. You know why? Because there is this amazing developer. He used his amazing knowledge and Bitcoin blockchain technology to protect results of election. And this is the reason why you need to protect him, judges who actually gave him this chance, who trusted him.
Yep.
So this is a momentum where we show that members of the parliament who care about human rights, they supported him.
Yep.
And they supported not only him, but also enforcement of using Bitcoin blockchain technology for other cases they want to study.
Yep.
And we need to help them. So when Jorge said that people actually in parliaments, in different institutions, they want to have they want to live in a better world, it's true. But the thing is what instrument they know, what knowledge they have, right? And what narratives they follow. And we live in the world of narratives, and all narratives around Bitcoin extremely, extremely negative. Who is going to change this narrative, if not us?
I love it, and I appreciate that, because what you're doing, I think a lot of people in the Bitcoin space like to talk about Bitcoin as if it were magic. Like it's magically going to fix the world. The phrase Bitcoin fixes this. It's not that's not necessarily how it works. It takes people like both of you who are out there speaking to people, who are out there highlighting the skills that people like Rafa Cardon have and what they've done. And I only smile because I'm so inspired by what both of you have done. There was one thing that I was speaking about earlier with Jorge, and Lyudmyla, you've been on a bunch of podcasts lately, Natalie Brunell's show, Marty Bent's show. Both of you travel around the world, you do this work. Some people might see that as very exciting. Oh, you do this great work, human rights, Bitcoin. These are all buzzwords, right? But the work that you do is very intense. It's quite intense, this work. And we were talking a little bit about some of the toll that it can take on you. So I want to just to take a step back. Again, we like to talk about Bitcoin in a very excited way and preserving human rights and this and that, but I just want to give you both a little bit of space to just talk about what it is like to personally do this work. And also maybe we could, to end on a high note also, to talk about how maybe people can support what you're both doing, more than just holding Bitcoin, setting a floor for the price and stuff like that, but how they can really, how you can help support the people who are using Bitcoin as a tool around the world to do this important work that often does get talked about a lot. But first, tell us a little bit about your own personal dealings with this and what it's like to be on the front lines of doing this sort of work. Please, Jorge.
Yes, I enjoyed the conversation that you and I had because you have been in Africa, you have been in Venezuela also. So we share many things. We share, I think, a commitment to the well-being of people. Just to tell you the truth, I believe that everybody is born with a goal in life. I believe that everybody is born with a talent in life. I believe that there are people who are born to be amazing parents, people who are born to be amazing business people. There are people who are born to be amazing architects or academics. In the case of me, for example, and I'm sure also with Lyudmyla, is that we are here because we want to have a better society. We are here because we believe that we can use our knowledge, our talent, our commitment to build a better society. Of course, not everything is pretty. Not everything is pretty. There's a ton of intense risk. There's a ton of frustration. And there is a ton of difficulties. And sometimes we feel it's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
I remember just the worst moment in Venezuela was 2018, for example. 10 million% inflation rate, shortages of food in which people cannot buy even meat. And I remember just thinking, how can we be able to even change this? It's just too much. But I think this is when you need to make a decision.
Yeah.
You need to make a decision. You need to make a decision of which type of path you're going to take. And in my case, and in the case of human rights activists, the path that we take is that we give ourselves, our talent, and our efforts towards this cause. And I believe this is the way societies, good societies are built. People who have a talent on architecture, they need to be the best one.
Yeah.
People who have a talent on being professors, they need to be the best one. And my comment, for example, to you and to everybody who is listening is that whatever you think that you can do very well, go for it and don't think about the consequences. Don't be afraid. Don't be extremely risky.
Don't overthink the consequences. Maybe follow your heart if that's...
Follow what you do good
Sure.
and what will make the world better tomorrow. And
Yeah.
when you are tired, think about why you are doing what you're doing. When you are tired, when you don't want to have a meeting at 10 p.m., because it happens, we're human beings, then you realize that why you do.
Yeah.
And for example, I'm sure in your case, you have been to difficult places that you had no reason to go, in the sense that you end up in Venezuela. For people who do not know, Frank was in my city, in Barquisimeto in Venezuela, and you come from the US, you come from the place in which you can actually develop the easiest life. You can work hard, you can buy a house, and in that way you can build a future, you can have a family. But you took a decision for some reason, maybe one day we can interview you, and to go to a very difficult place because you not only went to my city, you went to a very difficult place in my city.
I appreciate that. Lyudmyla, your experience?
So first of all, I kind of want to reply for the biggest, most famous statement: Bitcoin doesn't need you. Bitcoin doesn't need you. But
Yeah.
Bitcoin was created by a group of people who actually, I truly believe that they are human rights defenders.
Yeah.
Because they should see how all authoritarian regimes are going to abuse financial tools to prosecute and silence millions, billions of people. Yeah. They also saw that democracies, one step, how easily can get turned from democracies to authoritarian regimes if money completely controlled and there is no place for privacy.
Yeah.
And this is the reason these people, group of people, they created this important tool. So it was created by people because it was needed to people.
That's right.
So when we say that Bitcoin doesn't need us, of course it can exist as a technology, as a space, as everything, right? Like this lamp and everything, it can exist without us. But the issue is that we all want to be used because then we feel to be needed.
That's fair.
If Bitcoin is used by millions or billions of people, it means it's needed. It means that this effort done by this human rights group, which called Satoshi Nakamoto, if it's one person, if it's she or he, we don't know, if it's a group of people, that means that their impact of a society is living and developing. And we want it because it's so huge value for all of us.
Yep.
You see, you can be a payment instrument, it can be fundraising instrument, it's store of value. It's so much things you can do just with one freedom technology.
Yeah.
And this is the reason why we need to defend it.
Yeah.
If someone created, you shouldn't just say selfishly. I would say it selfishly. It doesn't need you.
Yeah.
Of course, but I need it. And I need it for many other my activists who completely financially excluded.
Yeah.
And I want them to be able to use it absolutely freely, with no limitation, at least from the side of democracies. Yeah. And it's not mean that I'm going to ask someone. No, it's my right. And I'm defending my rights, and I'm defending those rights of people whom I represent, who cannot have access to all of these regulators.
Yeah.
So for this reason, of course, from one side, it's frustrating because I need to do education not only for regulators, but also for actually those who represent sometimes Bitcoin community. Relief is that I see a lot of developers who wants to help us, who wants to give us these accessible and actually easy to use tools.
Yep.
And this gives me courage and all efforts to continue this work, to protect technology, to protect developers, to protect proof of work, because every time we go into regulators and policymakers to speak about how we use Bitcoin for human rights, they ask, but guys, how dare you use something which is bad for environment, which is bad for energy security, which is waste of water, and so on and so on. So we actually in position, we educating about even proof of work advantages, regulators, but we cannot do everything alone. And this is the reason why we try to put together coalition. We established 2 years ago a coalition, Building to Change coalition, which first of all united voices of those who financially excluded people, activists representing millions of people from all over the world. We invited Bitcoiners and also even crypto asset services providers, those who said on meetings to policymakers in EU and US why they cannot provide us services, why we only use peer-to-peer transactions.
Yep.
Because of all of these anti-money laundering regulation and abuses. It's important to unite forces of human defenders and users of Bitcoin, millions of voices who stand behind of our backs and who uses these technologies as the only resort, as the only instrument how to defend human rights and actually tech developers, Bitcoin miners in front of regulators.
Yep.
We cannot do it alone.
That's it. I think that's the perfect message to leave on. Bitcoin is sort of a magical invention, but to continue to have it work its magic on the world, we need people like Jorge, we need people like Lyudmyla doing what they're doing, and we need people like everybody watching this to support their efforts. So thank you guys very much. Again, we're coming to you from the Bitcoin Policy Summit. We appreciate it. Talk soon.